Coming up, Episode 11, Can the Placebo Effect Create Spontaneous Healings? Part 2 with Dr. Joe Dispenza.
Welcome to Having It All, Lifestyles of the Rich and Conscious with MarBeth Dunn, featuring experts and pioneers in health, wealth, relationships, and spirituality, creating a happier, healthier, wealthier you.
Welcome to the Having It All Show, Lifestyles of the Rich and Conscious. I'm your host, MarBeth Dunn, empath, intuitive, coach, mentor, best-selling author, and creator of the Spiritual Wealth Activation System, a step-by-step process to create miracles and abundance. If you're a frequent listener, thank you for subscribing to our show. And if you're new, welcome home. If you like what you hear, please join us weekly by subscribing to the show. Visit TheHavingItAllShow.com/ITC. Then click the blue View in iTunes button to subscribe. Coming up, Part 2 of a 3-podcast series with world-renowned neuroscientist, chiropractor, lecturer, and author, Dr. Joe Dispenza. Dr. Joe, you had some amazing personal transformation stories. I would love for you to share at least one of them with our listeners to demonstrate the power of what you're talking about.
Sure. I'll actually tell you one that just happened just recently so that it's not even in the book, so people will realize that this is a pretty common occurrence. I was in Europe a few months ago, and in Barcelona, actually, and I was doing an event it was called a Extended Progressive Workshop. So these were people that had studied my work for a little while. It was a Saturday afternoon, and it was a 2.5 day event, and we were taking a break, and I was walking off the stage. And as I was walking off the stage to go into the green room, a woman ran up and handed me an envelope. And I recognized her face. I took the envelope, and I went into the green room, and I read this woman's story. And I was so moved by this woman's story that I called her up on stage, and I had her tell her story to the entire audience. Now, this woman is a professional. She's a psychotherapist. She lives in Holland. She's an intelligent person. And on a Sunday morning a few years ago, she was in the shower, and her husband said goodbye to her 2 children, and then stuck his head in the bathroom and said goodbye, and then went to the tallest building in Amsterdam and jumped off the top of the building and committed suicide. Now, the moment she got the news, the event of her husband's suicide and her emotional reaction produced a series of very strong chemicals and very strong emotions. She was angry, she was resentful, she was suffering, she was in pain, she was regretting, and the end product of every experience is called an emotion. Now, the emotions that tend to cause problems in the brain and body are the hormones and emotions of stress. So this was a very stressful event. Now, what most people don't know is that when you think about the experience, you think about the past event, you produce the same chemistry in your brain and body as if the event is happening. And your body is your unconscious mind. It does not know the difference between an actual experience in your life that creates an emotion and an emotion that you can fabricate by thought alone. It's exactly the same to the body. So the body, as the unconscious mind, was reliving the experience 50 to 100 times a day. And it's the redundancy of those emotions that begin to program the body to begin to live in the past. Now, when we react to something or someone in our life, there's a refractory period of chemicals that are created, and we feel differently inside of us. The moment we feel differently inside of us, we pay attention to whatever caused it outside of us, and then that event in and of itself is called a memory. But if we don't know how to control our emotional reactions, and we allow that refractory period to run for hours or days, that's called a mood. A mood is one long emotional reaction. If you keep the same refractory period going on for weeks or months, that's called a temperament. That's one long emotional reaction, and people begin to memorize their emotions. And if you keep that same refractory period going on for years, that's called a personality trait. Now, this woman had every right to have an emotional reaction because of her loss. And she was grieving, but then what happened was that she started to interact with people and things in her life that reminded her on a moment-to-moment basis of her husband's suicide, and she kept producing the same chemistry. And it started to become part of her personality. It started to become part of her identity. And the emotions then became so common to her that she could no longer think greater than how she felt, or feelings had become the means of thinking. And the feelings and emotions are the record of the past, and for the most part, the majority of her thoughts were in the past. Now, if you keep thinking and feeling and feeling and thinking in the same cycle, the repetition of that conditions the body to become the mind. So now her body becomes the mind of the emotion, the body's now living in the past, and it becomes very difficult to walk into a new future when you're, for the most part, living in the past. So it's a scientific fact that the hormones of stress, long-term, push the genetic buttons that create disease. Emergency mode for an extended period of time, no organism in nature can tolerate living in emergency mode. It was the exact emotions that she was experiencing that began to downregulate genes that began to create a disease. So within about 6 months of time, she woke up one morning and she could not get out of bed. She had so much pain in her body, and the event from the past experience had finally manifested in her body as pain and paralysis. She was frozen from the experience. She went to the doctor. They brought an ambulance. They took her to the doctor. They did all kinds of tests on her. They found absolutely nothing wrong with her. And so now they called it neuritis. So the thing gets worse now, because now she can't walk. She can't take care of her young children. She can't work, which means she can't make money. Now her mother has to move in and take care of her, and now the stress levels go up even more. And of course now she's associating all of this with the past event. And if you said to this woman, "Why are you this way?" she would say, "I am this way because my husband committed suicide 6 months ago." In other words, I haven't been able to change emotionally since that event. So now, as a result of her malady, now that she's paralyzed, and she can't work and she can't take care of her children, and she can't get around, stress levels go up. And within a few months later, she develops these very large ulcerations in her mouth, in her esophagus, in her bladder, in her vagina, and in her anus. All the mucous membranes of her body now are ulcerated, large scabs. So now she can't eat. Now she's in pain on the inside, and she's in pain on the outside. And now her stress levels go up even more. And then a few months after that, she's diagnosed with esophageal cancer. So she comes to our workshop, and this is how she describes it. She comes to our very first workshop that I had done in Holland, and I talked about signaling the wrong genes in the wrong ways and the hormones of stress, and how past events sometimes are strong enough that begin to program the gene in the wrong way, and that emotions then keep us living in the past. And she started to piece together this understanding, and she started to practice her meditations. But it was very difficult for her in the beginning because she couldn't get her mind to be present. It kept going to the past, and she was in the habit of thinking in the past. So she had to really begin to become conscious of her unconscious thoughts, begin to pay attention to what she said and how she acted. She had to look at the emotions she was feeling every single day. And lighting a match in a dark place for most people is uncomfortable, but she was facing, leaving her children, and that was the thing that inspired her. So I finished that event in Holland, and I think it was 3 or 4 months later we did a more progressive event in New York City, and she had flown into New York City. Now I remember this woman because when she came to my event in Holland, she was up with a walker. She was in a wheelchair, and then when she stood up, she used the walker to get around. So I remember her specifically. So she came to New York with her crutches. She was on crutches and a walker. And that group in that event was very mature, so we pushed them a little further than where people typically go. And I love to do that because right on the other side of someone's pain is freedom. It's the same energy. It's just trapped in the body. On the other side of someone's resentment is true joy. It's the same energy. It's just trapped in the body. So I pushed her past her point where she would typically go, and she had a breakthrough. And she saw herself. She didn't create the vision. The vision happened to her. she saw herself standing up in front of an audience and telling everybody that she was healed, and she was more surprised by that vision than anybody. So now she broke through, she went back into her life, and every single day she did her meditation. Every day she moved into a new state of being. Every day she took the placebo. And so she made a decision that she wouldn't get up from her meditation until she was in love with life. Now here's where the rubber meets the road, and this is where greatness can be defined. If you think about it, to the materialist, to the person who's defining reality with their senses, she had absolutely no reason to be in love with her life. She had lost her husband, she couldn't take care of her children, she had lost her job, she had no money, she had cancer, she had sores on the inside of her mouth, inside of her mucous membranes, she was in a lot of pain, she couldn't walk, she was in bad shape. But she said, I am no longer going to be defined by a memory of the past. I'm going to be defined as a vision of the future. And so she overcame her emotional self and her emotional body every single day, and she got up from her meditation in love with life every single day, moved into a new state of being. Now, after a period of time, all of a sudden, all the pain in her body went away, and she stood on the stage that day, and she said, I just came from my doctor last week. I have no evidence of esophageal cancer. I have no evidence of any sores or any growths in any of my mucous membranes. I have complete control over my body again. I'm back to work. I feel great. I'm in love with my life, and I have a new husband. Now, you see, she moved into a new personality, and the disease existed in the old personality. She became somebody else. And every single day, I'm certain that there were days that she didn't feel like doing her meditation. I'm certain there are days that she didn't think that it was even possible to heal her condition, that she had doubts. But in spite of that, every day she fell in love with a new life. And she was on the stage and she said, and I am so in love with my life right now. And I said to her, of course you are. You created from the state of being in love with your life. The disease exists in the old personality. You're a new personality, and a new personality creates a new personal reality. And so here's an example of someone who turned the battleship around, and she was no longer defined by her past. And she stood on the stage that day, and she said, the condition, my disease, and the event that took place in my life was my greatest teacher. And when you overcome an emotion, a memory without the emotional charge is called wisdom. And she literally has been reborn again in the same life.
We'll be back to our show in just a moment. Would you agree that the current state of the world is angry, chaotic, turbulent, and possibly insane? And that's not even mentioning everyone's personal issues. We all need miracles, and now is the time. I'm MarBeth Dunn, the Miracle Mama. Imagine a river of miracles flowing into your life, bringing harmonious relationships, better health, prosperity, clarity, peace of mind, and a deep sense of joy. What if you could know all your needs are being met and feel calm and peaceful even in the midst of turbulent change? Get your free guide now, 7 easy ways to harness the power of miracles at miracles101.com. That's miracles101.com, and live your miraculous life. Oh, that is so beautiful and so powerful. And what struck me is the stories of people with multiple personalities, where one personality might be diabetic and another one would be perfectly healthy. It's the same body, yet it's a different state of mind. So that totally resonates. Can we talk a little bit more about the placebo effect? Because it's so fascinating. How does it work?
That's a great question. Well, the placebo is really built on 3 principles that all commingle with each other. The first one is called expectation. So, if you wake up every day and you think the same thoughts, and, 90% of our thoughts are the same thoughts as the day before, And we think about 60 to 70,000 thoughts in one day. So the same thoughts always lead to the same choices. The same choices always lead to the same behaviors. The same behaviors always create the same experiences, and the same experiences produce the same emotions. And the same emotions drive the very same thoughts. And our biology, our neurocircuitry, our neurotransmitters, our neurohormones, our chemicals, and even our genetic expression are equal to how we think, how we act, and how we feel. So you wake up every morning and you expect the same thing to happen as the day before. So most people's futures are conditioned from their past. So placebo is, as I said earlier, you give someone a fake pill, let's say an antidepressant, and 3 out of 4 people in placebo studies that get a placebo for depression get better. So they begin to think that that pill represents a possible change in their health. That's an intention. The moment they begin to think about feeling better, they begin to create the emotion of gratitude or expectation or excitement or appreciation or inspiration. And the moment they combine that clear intention with the elevated emotion, they're expecting a new future. And so in the case of antidepressants, a certain % of those people will begin to make their own pharmacy of antidepressants that begin to match the exact antidepressant that they think they're taking. So that's the first element. It's called expectation. The second one is called conditioning. And that means then if you give someone a blue pill that represents taking their pain away, and that blue pill does take their pain away, and they keep taking that blue pill or getting an injection that reduces their pain, there'll come a moment where you can give them a pill that looks blue, but it's not the drug any longer, and as they have been conditioned, the moment they see that pill, the pill represents, by association, the thought and the feeling of being well. And so just like Pavlov's dogs, where you ring a bell and the dogs begin to salivate because they were conditioned to associate the bell with being fed. Just like that, when you see the pill, your body begins to prepare itself for the experience ahead of the actual experience, and the body subconsciously begins to change, and the autonomic nervous system begins to alter itself, and the body is ready for the event, or the body is believing that the event is going to occur. So that conditioning process then for a certain percentage of people allows them to begin to make their own proper chemistry. So then there's levels of conditioning because, some people think they need a flu shot, and of course if they've been conditioned that way, then they'll get sick during flu season. And so if you take a blue pill, usually it calms a person down. If they take a red pill, it tends to speed them up. The name of the pill, is important. The doctor's enthusiasm is important. And another ingredient is sometimes holding the drug away from the person, saying, wow, this is one of our most powerful analgesics, really important pain pill. And we don't like to give it out too often, but it works really well. And then have the person want the medication really bad. The moment they start to want it really bad, the expectation increases, their conditioning increases, and their body is beginning to really be conditioned into that future. So conditioning is the second thing.
Be sure to catch Part 3 in Episode 12. Can the placebo effect create spontaneous healing? With Dr. Joe Dispenza. For more information on Dr. Joe Dispenza, his books, his website, his social media information, visit his show page on TheHavingItAllShow.com. If you haven't already, be sure to subscribe to The Having It All Show and never miss an episode. Visit TheHavingItAllShow.com, and there in the banner on the top of the page, you'll see a red subscribe for free on iTunes button. On the show pages, you can also listen through the Stitcher app. And if you're on an iPhone, click on TheHavingItAllShow.com/ITC, where you can easily subscribe on iTunes. Looking for more wealth and wellness? Visit TheHavingItAllShow.com, download your free guide, 5 Steps to Wealth and Wellness and the Pitfalls to Avoid. That's TheHavingItAllShow.com.
Join MarBeth on The Having It All Show, Lifestyles of the Rich and Conscious. Visit TheHavingItAllShow.com now to learn more about MarBeth and her special guests and download your free report.